Thank you, Matthew, for that wonderful presentation. For those of you just joining us, we're wrapping up. That was Matthew Curtis, who you're going to hear from again shortly. He was giving a talk to some of our Guardian Society donors as a preview to the rest of the program tonight. Welcome. I'm Scott Hollander, the Executive Director of KidsVoice, and I'm so glad that people could join us tonight. So we have the opportunity to thank our supporters and donors for what they've helped us to accomplish in this very challenging year, and to be able to share with you how our staff and organization has responded to COVID-19's impact on our work and our clients. As many of you may know, we represent over 3,000 clients each year who are involved in abuse and neglect cases in juvenile court. Over 2,000 of them are placed in foster homes or group homes. Others remain or become reunified with their parents who are working to address the issues that led to that family's involvement in court. And then we also stay with our clients until they turn 25. So even after their case is closed, we help them with housing and credit, Social Security issues, transitioning into the adult mental health or disability system, which is so critical for children who, well, any child of any family often has a safety net from their family. If something gets, things get difficult, they need help. Our clients tend to not have that, and KidsVoice plays a bit of that role until their 25th birthday. So when the pandemic hit and schools and businesses closed, it took quite the toll on our clients. Many of them rely on school. Maybe that's where they get a school breakfast and lunch, and it's their only meal of the day. It may be that that's where they get their medical care because they rely on a school nurse and don't often get to a doctor otherwise. It may be the only place that's safe for them, where they can be with family, with their friends or with teachers, and their home environment isn't so supportive. It also took a toll on our foster parents and, of course, parents themselves. But our foster parents, when they take in a sibling group of 3 children, for example, they didn't sign up for 24/7 care. They expected children to go to school, to go to daycare, to play sports after school, to have weekend visits with their families as their parents worked to getting them back, and having those kinds of breaks. In addition, as many of you experienced, this has been a very stressful time. Not knowing about the health risks, not being able to get food as easily as you would like, or toilet paper or other household supplies. So imagine trying to do that for your own family plus a sibling group of 3 that you've brought in. And that doesn't take into account that many of our foster families were at risk of the economic impact. Many of them worked in service industries where they were not able to work, or were there's a threat of losing their job. Some of them were grandparents who are in their 60s and more vulnerable to COVID and taking care of children. All of this was a recipe for our foster parents to say, I'm not doing this. Please take these kids away. And if that were to happen, we had nowhere to put them. There was just an interesting article nationally about the lack of foster parents that are available. People are not jumping up and down in the pandemic to take strangers into their home, particularly children who didn't work out in other people's homes. So that's been a big challenge. Plus, many of our clients have suffered trauma from the physical abuse or sexual abuse they suffered and require mental health support and other services. Well, they couldn't go to their therapists or go to group therapy during the pandemic. Some of them were not in homes that had Wi-Fi, and they couldn't access telehealth or telemental health. So these were all sorts of pressures. And that's before you even get to the pressure on foster parents and the pressure on many of you who are here in attendance tonight of having to take care of your children's education. So now they had jobs they were trying to hold down, all of those pressures, and particularly for younger children, having to make sure they could get online or had devices and could follow up with school. So it was just an intensive time. So our staff had to shift gears. Our court was closed except for emergency motions and for new removals. And what our staff decided to do was put together a very focused and concerted effort to reach out to each child. We couldn't wait for the cases to cycle in every 3 months, as they tend to do, and make that when we would sort of check in and follow up on our cases. We had to reach out immediately as this hit to check in with each of the children, their caregivers, and make sure that they had what they need. That might have been Wi-Fi for school. It might have been helping foster parents receive stimulus checks or apply for unemployment. be able to get Wi-Fi, let them know about telehealth and telemental health so we can get supports for the children or perhaps for the caregivers themselves. If they needed help with school, we did that. We took a number of our staff and made them designated experts on various school districts where our children are. Many of you had to deal with one school in one school district for your children, or maybe 2 or 3. But our clients are in over 50 different school districts. There are 43 in Allegheny County, and plus some of our clients are placed in districts outside the county in group homes and foster homes when they live out there. So we designated staff who could more efficiently address those things. The other thing that happened is over the summer, the Pennsylvania Department of Education issued a guidance that required districts who did not provide special education services completely through the year due to the pandemic to have to provide recoupment services to special education children who didn't have the requirements of their IEPs, their individualized education plans met. So our staff, again, learned about this and quickly sprung into action, and over the summer identified those clients who would be eligible, reached out to school districts to try to make that start to happen. And now we're in the second cycle. We also reached out to, we also reached out to every client at the beginning of the school year to make sure that they were set, because if they needed anything to be able to be successful, as schools are struggling to meet children's needs, and a lot of our clients don't have the kind of support that maybe some of you and your children have. And we're about to start that again now at the end of the first quarter. How did that go? Are our students behind? To check in with the teachers, check in with the caregivers, check in with our clients to see what they may need for the second quarter as things are shifting again. And some schools are moving into a hybrid model from being totally online, including our biggest district, Pittsburgh Public Schools, starting that on November 9th. The other thing that's happened during this time is all those pressures we talked about on foster parents. That's true for families who are at risk but are not already in the system. Everyone believes, experts across the country, that in this environment, there's far more abuse, child abuse, spousal abuse, and intimate partner violence because of all these pressures that people are feeling during this time. But the problem is no one's seeing it. It's invisible because most of the reporting of abuse that comes to the attention of the authorities comes from mandated reporters, teachers, clergy, coaches, even sometimes friends and family who aren't mandated reporters. Many of them are not seeing children as much as they were before. And so that's created even more of an issue. Interestingly, there are programs, like we have child advocacy centers in a couple of our hospitals in Pittsburgh that are specialists in very significant cases of child abuse. So these are medical experts who can determine whether or not the medical evidence supports the parent's story about how the injury occurred. In a severe physical abuse case, they have forensic psychologists who are skilled in interviewing traumatized children about what happened for serious cases of sexual abuse or those who witness horrible physical abuse. But those cases weren't coming in. So those medical facilities had capacity and they weren't being paid for those visits. So we reached out to the county and to Children's Hospital's Child Advocacy Center because we needed more capacity. We used this time when we weren't in court to get up to date on all of our clients' medical records and mental health records. But we often needed help to understand them or figure out what to do when it looked like there was a problem. And so we asked the county if they would amend the contract with Children's Hospital to do those child abuse investigations to allow Children's to work with KidsVoice to help us with our cases, understand those records, and provide telehealth to our clients and to their caregivers. It was a huge success in several ways, in that we now had access, and from that we've got to the point now where the county recognizes the value of that and has been very supportive, and is going to now take what was only going to go through June 30th and is funding it for the whole year again. That was June 30th of this past year. So until June 30th of 2021, we now have funding in place with the cooperation of the county to do that. Interestingly, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services heard about that arrangement and what we were doing during COVID with these child advocacy centers, which happen all over the country. And they asked Children's and KidsVoice to present to a federal group that was comprised of the state child advocacy center representatives from every state in the country, and to hear about this partnership and how other states could do the same thing and use that capacity to help during the pandemic. The other partnership we did with the county that was terrific dealt with our clients who turned 21 while they were in foster care. On your 21st birthday, you get to leave your foster home or group home and go live on your own. That's what happens when you leave foster care. You're expected to be able to then have your own job, take care of yourself completely when you've had no role model, no family support, no safety net. That's tough enough for our clients aging out of foster care when unemployment is at 2% or 3% as it was earlier in the year. But when things changed with the pandemic and people were laid off, and now there were plenty of qualified, experienced people for any job that our clients would be looking for, it was virtually impossible for them to be able to get employment, to live on their own, to be successful, not end up homeless and at risk of COVID. We quickly looked at all of our clients over about a 5-month period who were going to age out of foster care at 21. And we went to the county with specific plans about what each of those children would need, whether it was to stay in their foster home or go to a particular setting where there was an apartment available, what the cost would be, and ask the county if they might be willing to allow them to stay in those placements or pay for those living situations beyond 21. The county did not bat an eye and immediately said yes, they would do that. We had offered to go to the feds and try to see if the feds would create a waiver for the federal reimbursement for those over 21 youth that was supposed to end at 21. The county said that would be great, but even if that didn't happen, they would fund this. And we went to the feds and asked them for that waiver, and they told us there was a way to do that. And in fact, they then published, it was moved, the states could elect a certain category of funding that I won't go into the details of, and they could shift dollars over to that funding and continue to provide that support for those youth. And they published a guidance federally for other states to be able to do the same thing. So those are two areas where we had terrific support and innovation from the county in a very difficult time that led to other solutions in other places beyond just our clients. The one other thing I want to share with you tonight is some data analysis from our education work and in our representation of our clients in magistrate, district judge, summary offense cases. I'll call those MDJ cases, or magistrate district judge cases. These are minor criminal offenses for which you can't go to jail. But if my children, or if you have young children, they were to do something silly like, if my kid took a beer to a football game and got caught, they'd end up going before the MDJ, or someone might have a disturbing the peace charge or something along those lines. Very minor, couldn't go to jail, but you go to these cases in court, and if I were to show up looking like I do now, or bringing a lawyer for a child, chances are they would get no consequence, or maybe community service, and they would have no criminal record. But when our clients don't show up for those hearings, or they show up with a poor attitude and don't have the kind of support that we do for our kids, they end up with a guilty charge, which means they have a criminal record, and a $300 fine plus $150 court costs, a $450 debt that they can't pay. Now they end up with a credit issue and a criminal record that stays with them for their life when they may apply for a job or try to get housing. So we've been taking on that representation for some time now. I should also add that if you don't pay that fine, then you can go to jail for failure to comply with that court order. So I'm gonna share my screen. I want to show you some data here. Bear with me just a second. If I can make this work. Okay. Can you see that? Just nod if, okay, I got a thumbs up. So this is showing our data over a 6-year period, that essentially what you see here is that for the clients we represented in those MDJ cases, we had a 74% success rate, meaning they were found not guilty or the charges are dismissed or withdrawn. For other dependent youth, same time, same ages, same period, 36%. So more than double the success rate just for having the representation from KidsVoice. And avoiding those fines, avoiding those criminal records. Okay, so then we look at rearrest rate. So the interesting thing here is this is saying after you have that MDJ case, how many of those youth were rearrested then within these time periods, 6, 12, and 36 months. At 6 months, only 3% of our clients, whoops, I went too far. Only 3% of our clients were rearrested versus 15% of the control group for the same time period. 6% at 12 months for KidsVoice clients versus 19%, and 18% at 36 months versus 29%. So that was encouraging to see as well in terms of our representation and the impact it had. Now, if you take both of those pieces of information, they come together in this way. So this data looks at how many clients, what percentage of our clients ended up with no MDJ record because they weren't found guilty and were not rearrested. So they never ended up with a criminal record or a fine that they had to pay. And that showed that we had a 64% rate versus a 26% rate on the control group side. And in fact, we just got some new information from the county that I didn't have time to get a new slide together that shows that our rate actually has now gone up to 68%. So we're really pleased to see those numbers, because that's the name of the game. The reason we do that is to give them the kind of opportunities for the future so they can get jobs, get housing, become independent as they leave foster care. One other piece I'll show you is about race. The vast majority of the MDJ charges are against Black males. In our cases, for our Black male clients, we have a 65% success rate. So 65% of the Black male KidsVoice clients received a not guilty charge or had the charges dismissed or withdrawn versus 29% of Black males in the control group. So that's what I want to show about the MDJ side. On the education outcomes, I wanted to just briefly say this. Of our 3,000 clients a year, we have over 200 for whom they have no parent involved in their education. And so KidsVoice ends up being appointed as a last resort to be the educational decision maker, to step into the shoes of the parent, to sign for attendance, to go to school, to participate in special education issues, to address anything that comes up in that child's educational life. So for those clients, the county did a data analysis because they can tie into school attendance, GPA, and suspension/discipline issues. And looking at the data for the year before we were involved, the year we first became involved, and the year after that, this is what it showed, that 44% of our clients improved their school attendance, 53% improved their GPA, and 17% decreased their suspensions. So we were really encouraged by this. And I also want to just, one caution is that while it is encouraging, it should be treated as preliminary because there was only complete 3-year data for 70 youth for that measured period. So our sample is pretty small, but it's still something that we've been happy to be able to show. So I'll stop sharing and get back to this. So I just wanted to really just conclude in saying a couple things. One, I want to thank our staff. Our staff are the ones that did this work. They deserve tremendous credit for making this happen at a time when everything was uncertain in their lives too. They were dealing with their health, their family's health. Many of them have young children and they're trying to figure out their education, and they were able to step up and be innovative about this. And they were able to do that because of the support of many of you who are donors and supporters of KidsVoice and have helped to make this happen. So you deserve that credit as well. And it's really critical to have that support at this time during COVID, when many nonprofits are struggling, when many families are struggling, and we're waiting for everyone's really waiting for the hammer to fall here next month, because many of you may know the state, Pennsylvania passed a 5-month state budget that just continued its spending at the regular rate in every department. It's unsustainable, and they're going to issue a new budget that will be drastically reduced for the final 7 months of the year that start December through June. And the Department of Human Services for Pennsylvania is likely to take a big hit, maybe 20% or more. And those will be passed on to cuts in county contracts and services for children, including potentially services like KidsVoice. So having your support is so critical during this time. So I'm not here to whine about that when we have our very own wine expert who can talk to us about some really wonderful things for the fall. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, and I'll turn things over to Matthew Curtis, who's the sommelier at the Edgeworth Club, and is going to tell us a little more about wines for the fall. Thank you all for your support and for being here tonight to hear about Kids Voice and have some fun with us as well.